One of the things that Jesus answered when disciples came and asked him about what are the signs of your second coming, Jesus said about that nations are going to come against nations and there'll be a lot of conflict and a lot of earthquakes and a lot of natural disaster that will happen. But one sign he gave among the believers, and he said that, you know what, the love will go cold. He also said that people will get offended. In our generation, we can find that, you know what, lots of people get offended today. In families, relationships are offended. There is stress all over in relationships. If you see, divorces are happening more than ever in our generation. Fights are happening more in our generation than ever in the history of humanity. Although education, we are at the best in our education. But you know what? Education is not helping us. Although we have better mansions to stay, we have got a lot of money to spend, but the love, the genuine love and care is diminishing. And this is one of the signs of the end times. My friends, how is it that in this kind of time when everywhere people are becoming selfishly driven, everybody is interested in somehow to make most for himself, how can we make a different standard for people? How can we be light in such gross darkness? How can we set an example that people might look into our lives and truly follow Jesus Christ? Here is my recommendation. When I look into the scriptures, I see that, Satan uses offense to come into our house, to come into our lives, to come into our business, to come into our relationships and destroy. His number one attack is upon our peace. He doesn't like man to be at peace with himself, with his family members, with his neighbors, no matter where we go. He likes to keep us angry and agitated. And this is where we have been given the mind of Christ, because mind of Christ has an ability to rule above the emotions that pulls us down. It has ability to go beyond what other people would stop. And that is what kept Jesus on the cross. And although in the midst of all pain, all agony, he was such a man of peace that his peace actually invaded the whole world. Today, my recommendation is, if we look into the life of Christ, that our lives will never be the same again. Few examples I want to bring to you. One example is very interesting. It is in 2 Kings chapter 5. And in Bible, you read the story of a Syrian commander. This guy was heavy built. He was a commander of Syrian army, a very mighty man. Bible says that God brought many victories through this man. But in all of his victories, all of his great achievements, there was one area in his life where he was not so happy. And that was because he had leprosy. Although outside, when he would wear all of his armor, he would look so impressive outside, but inside there is a problem. He would hide his weakness in his shining armor. How many times we all do the same thing, that our inside life is hidden behind our talents, is hidden behind our success, is hidden behind our achievements. And we never address to that real situation in our life, but we try to hide and camouflage it with our achievements in life and somehow think that our achievements will be long lasting enough. But I want you to understand, my friends, Naaman tried to do the same thing, but it didn't last long for him. One day, he got a news that there is God in Israel. And if he could go to the man of God there, he would be totally healed. So he goes to his king. He goes to his king and says, "King, would you give me a letter that will be for the king of Israel?" He takes the letter. He goes to the king of Israel and says, "My king has given this letter." The king of Israel takes that letter and he sees, and he says, the king of Israel is now tormented. He says, "Look how Syrian king is trying to find an accusation against me. He is trying to ruin me. He is trying to think that I am a god. I cannot heal Naaman." The letters demanded that the king of Israel would cure Naaman's leprosy. Yeah, my friend, this news came to the man of God who was in Samaria. His name was Elisha. And when Elisha got this news, Elisha sent a message to king and he said, "O king, send Naaman to me and he will know that there is a king in Israel." So now Bible says that with all of his chariots and his horses and lots of wealth, he came to the door of Elijah. This sick man came to the place of his miracle. He was one step nearer. He was just one step to his miracle, and he could have received his miracle. Satan did not stop him when he started from his house. He was not robbed on the way. Nothing distracted him when he was on the way. But you know what? At his last step, something went wrong. Bible declares that he came to the man of God, and the man of God sent his servant and said, hey, go tell Naaman, go to River Jordan, dip yourself 7 times, and you'll be totally healed. But when Naaman heard this news, rather than getting excited about going and dipping 7 times in river and being healed, this man got so furious. Think about it. He's like a man who is sick, wants to go and see a doctor, but he already has a prescription in his mind. He has already thought what doctor should prescribe him. And if doctor prescribes him something different than what he has thought, he is unwilling. He is not willing to receive that medication. He becomes very, very upset. That's what Naaman is behaving like. One of his servants was smart. He goes to Naaman and he says, Master, if he would have asked you to do it, something big, you would have done it. This is just a minor thing. Why don't you do it? So he gave heed to his servant's voice, goes back to Jordan, dips himself 7 times, and for sure, he is now healed. He comes back with a gift to the man of God. Well, the point of the story is he nearly lost his miracle because he was offended. Now, what could have offended Naaman? Probably his thought. He thought that, he's so great that he brought a royal letter. He came to king. He was a sick man. He didn't come quietly. He came with a huge, huge entourage of people. And when he came with so many people, his heart was not in it. He came to show how powerful he was. But the man of God just gave him a simple remedy, and he got offended. He began to say, I thought that he would come, he would build an altar to his God, he would make a sacrifice to his God, he would call upon his God, lay his hands on me and heal. How often in our lives we come into a similar situation where we want to do something, maybe probably start a new business, probably want to enter into a new relationship, probably go to a church, find a new set of friends, or want to do something in our life, even in our own families. When people don't behave the way we have expected them to behave with us, it offends us. And we get so upset about it that it ruins our day, it ruins our life, it ruins our peace. It's not worth, my friends, losing our life over such petty things. We have habits sometime of making mountain out of molehills. Bible says a man who rules his spirit is better than a person who governs a city. My friends, Naaman was a man. He was such a ruler. Such great victories he has seen in his life. But one area he was constantly defeated, and that was in the area he would get offended quickly. He would get angry very quickly. And when we are angry, we can only remember bad things about people. When we are angry, one of the things about anger I know, it never reminds you of good things. Anger has this speciality in it that it can remind you of all the evil that has been done for you. And it all comes in a flow in our minds. Think about another example. And another example is again the first king of Israel. His name was King Saul. He was a man who was amazingly gifted. He was picked up from all the nation to be the king of Israel. He was doing pretty well. Every nation he fought against, he was experiencing victory. Things were going on better for him until one day his junior David came in the picture. And Bible declares now David began to wage wars for Saul, and he behaved wisely. Everywhere David went, he came with great reports. He came with greater victories. And one day when David was returning back from his victories, in 1 Samuel chapter 18, we read this story from verse 5 to 10. You find that when David was returning back from battle, Saul went to welcome David and the armies of Israel. And there were also a few ladies who went along with him. And they began to sing a song. The song was that Saul has killed thousands, but David has killed 10,000s. And when he heard this 2-line chorus, that Saul killed thousands and David killed 10,000, Saul could not tolerate it. Saul got so upset in his life that he said, oh, they have already attributed kingdom to him. They've already attributed greater victories to him. To him, they have attributed 10,000s, and to me, they have attributed only thousands. What more is left? He would take my kingdom. And Bible says, from that moment onwards, it's a very important phrase in Bible. From that moment onwards, Saul started to have an evil eye against David. He wanted to look at David, to find a loophole into his life. He wanted to kill and destroy David. I think about that this was the man. King Saul was such a loving person that one day he picked a shepherd boy and made him a musician in the royal court. Not only that, he made him his own son-in-law after he has defeated Goliath. Not only that, he has given him promotion after promotion. He was treated as one of his sons. He was given the liberty to call him